In the vast alien palace of the Zorath, the throne room was grand and intimidating. Its walls were lined with tall pillars made from dark stone that shimmered faintly in the light of distant stars. The air was filled with the hum of strange machinery, and at the far end of the room, the grand throne stood tall. On that throne sat Princess Xelara, the youngest daughter of the mighty Zorathian emperor. At just 19 years old, she was already known for her sharp wit, her cold demeanor, and her strong belief that her people were the superior race in the galaxy. The Zorathian Empire had been at war with the humans for years. Tensions had risen to the point where diplomacy seemed impossible, but now, at last, there had been a tentative agreement for peace talks. The humans, it was said, had sent one of their finest warriors to represent them, but none of them, least of all Xelara, believed the human was worthy of any respect. As the doors of the throne room opened, all eyes turned toward the human envoy. He was tall and muscular, wearing the armor of his people, the famed human military armor which seemed to glow faintly under the light. Captain Roderick Darnell, known as Rod to his comrades, walked into the room with his head held high, his eyes focused on the alien princess seated before him. He had seen many battlefields, fought many wars, and faced much greater dangers than anything the Zorath could throw at him. But standing in the presence of the young Zorathian princess, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Xelara studied him with a gaze that was cold and calculating. To her, humans were nothing more than primitive creatures, driven by emotion and strength, but lacking the grace and intellect that Zorathians had perfected over centuries. She had heard stories about the bravery of human soldiers, but she wasn't impressed. Humans relied too much on their technology and their physical. Strength was nothing compared to the natural abilities of the Zorath. "Human!" Xelara's voice rang out, sharp and clear. "Do you truly believe that your kind can stand against us? That your weapons, your technology, your brute strength are enough to challenge the might of the Zorath Empire?" Rod didn't flinch. He had faced harsh words before. Many times in his career, he had heard insults from enemies far stronger than this alien princess. But there was something different about Xelara, the way she looked at him, as if he was nothing more than an insect beneath her heel. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a deep, almost unshakable belief in her own superiority. With calm precision, Rod stepped forward. His voice was steady as he replied, "I'm here to negotiate peace, Princess. Not to fight. But if it's a fight you want, I'm prepared to prove that humans can stand toe-to-toe with any alien race, Zorath included." Xelara's eyes narrowed, clearly not pleased by his response. "Prove it?" she asked, a mocking smile playing on her lips. "And how exactly would you do that, human? By showing me your strength? Your tactics? Perhaps you think you can impress me by flexing your muscles?" Rod didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly reached up and unbuckled the straps of his armor. Xelara watched, her eyebrows lifting slightly in surprise. She wasn't sure if this was a tactic or if he truly believed removing his armor would somehow intimidate her. Either way, it was clear to her that this was a move designed to show off his confidence, or perhaps foolishness. With a quiet click, Rod's armor fell to the ground with a dull thud. As the last piece clattered to the floor, he stood there, bare-chested, in front of the princess. His muscles were well-defined, but it wasn't his physical appearance that had Xelara taken aback. It was the quiet calm in his eyes. His posture was relaxed, as though he had done this countless times before. Xelara, for a moment, was speechless. She had expected arrogance. She had expected him to speak of humanity's strength and boast of their abilities. But instead, this human had done something she never imagined. He had shown his vulnerability. He had removed his armor, leaving himself exposed, yet his eyes never wavered. "You take off your armor as if it were nothing," Xelara said, her voice full of disbelief. "Do you think that will impress me? that I will somehow be moved by your display of weakness? Rod looked directly into her eyes. You think it's weakness, Princess, but this is me, without my armor. No tricks, no shields, just who I am. Humans have learned that true strength isn't just in armor or weapons. It's in our ability to stand firm when everything around us falls apart. It's in knowing that we'll keep fighting no matter what. Zalara scowled at his words. She had heard the stories about humans, their stubbornness, their unyielding will to fight. But hearing it from this soldier standing before her, stripped of his protective gear, made something stir within her. This human, this soldier, was different from the others. She had expected a weakling, someone she could mock and dismiss. But this man was something else. His confidence was unsettling. Very well, human, Zalara finally said, her voice dripping with disdain. If you believe your strength can stand against mine, then I challenge you. Prove to me that your kind is worthy of anything more than pity. Prove to me that you can match the Zorath. Rod didn't hesitate. I accept your challenge, Princess. But know this. I don't fight for pride or honor or glory. I fight because I believe in the strength of my people, and if I have to show you that, so be it. As Zalara stood from her throne, her expression cold as ever, she felt a strange sense of anticipation. She wasn't sure what it was, but for the first time she felt that maybe this human soldier had something to offer. The challenge was set, and neither of them knew it yet, but this moment would change everything. The grand arena of the Zorathian palace was filled with a tense silence as the crowd gathered. It was unlike anything Rod had ever seen. The floor was smooth and polished, stretching out beneath a high, domed ceiling. Lights from above cast long shadows across the room, illuminating the massive stone pillars that lined the walls. The Zorathians, with their sharp eyes and cold expressions, filled the stands, their attention fixed on the two figures standing in the center of the arena. Rod and Princess Zalara stood facing each other, the distance between them charged with unspoken energy. Zalara's eyes never left him. She watched, almost with contempt, as Rod stretched his arms, preparing himself for whatever the princess had in store. I hope you're ready for this, human, Zalara said, her voice icy, but there was a hint of something else, something like curiosity that she couldn't quite hide. Rod didn't respond. His focus was on the task ahead. He wasn't worried. He had faced battles more dangerous than this, against enemies that could crush him without a second thought. Yet somehow, this moment felt different. It wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about proving something to Zalara, something deeper than physical strength. The princess raised her hand, signaling the start of the trial. A loud clang echoed through the arena as two massive gates opened on opposite sides, revealing the first challenge, a group of Zorathian warriors armed with long spears. They were towering figures, their bodies rippling with muscle and adorned in the ceremonial armor of their kind. Rod's eyes narrowed. He could see the warriors' confidence, too much confidence. They were underestimating him. But that was just the way he liked it. The first warrior charged forward, his spear aimed straight at Rod's chest. In a flash, Rod sidestepped, his movements swift and calculated. With a sharp twist of his wrist, he disarmed the Zorathian and sent him tumbling to the ground, his spear skidding across the smooth floor. The warrior tried to regain his footing, but Rod was already on the move, his boot landing firmly on the alien's chest. Zalara watched in stunned silence. She had expected Rod to struggle, but instead, he made it look almost effortless. The warrior beneath him grunted in defeat, but Rod didn't stop. He didn't show any sign of pride or arrogance. His face remained calm, as though this was just another day on the battlefield. Another warrior rushed at him, this time from behind, but Rod had already anticipated the move. He ducked low, grabbing the warrior by the legs and tossing him over his shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground. The crowd gasped, and for the first time, Zalara's face betrayed a flicker of surprise. Rod wasn't done yet. As the final two warriors advanced, Rod closed the distance, his movements fluid and quick. He avoided every strike with ease, and then, in a single smooth motion, he knocked both warriors off their feet. They landed with a loud thud, groaning in defeat. The arena fell silent. Zalara stood there, her eyes wide, unable to hide her shock. She had seen Zorathian warriors defeat enemies in the past, but never like this. Rod didn't just fight with strength. He fought with precision, with skill, and with a deep understanding of the battle. He was far more than just a brute force. Rod turned to face her, his expression unreadable. He had done what he set out to do, prove that humans were not to be underestimated. He wasn't here for pride. He was here for respect. Zalara's voice broke the silence. "Impressive," she said, her tone cool but laced with something else, something like admiration. "But this was just the first test. You've still much to prove." Rod didn't respond. He was ready for whatever came next. He knew this was just the beginning. But then, as if to further test him, the next trial was revealed. A massive creature, half mechanical, half organic, was released into the arena. It was a beast from Zorathian mythology, said to be the fiercest predator of the planet. It stood over 10 feet tall with spiny, armored plating covering its body. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and its claws scraped against the stone floor. With an eerie screech, Rod's heart rate quickened. This wasn't just a test of strength, it was a test of survival. He didn't have the luxury of underestimating this creature. The crowd roared with excitement as the creature began to move, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath their feet. Zalara watched with a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. She had no doubt that the creature would defeat the human soldier. It was Zorathian tradition that no outsider had ever survived an encounter with the beast. And yet, she had to admit, there was something intriguing about Rod's calm demeanor. Rod tightened his fists, his focus sharpened. He had faced enemies. Like this before, creatures far more terrifying than anything Zalara could imagine. But this was different. This was a test that would show Zalara that humans didn't rely on sheer strength alone. The creature lunged at him, its jaws snapping. Rod dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly bite. He had only moments to act. The creature was fast, too fast for most humans to handle, but Rod wasn't like most humans. He had trained his entire life to handle moments like this. With a quick roll, he moved behind the beast, using its massive size to his advantage. As it turned, he grabbed one of its spiked legs and used its momentum to twist it off balance. The creature stumbled, roaring in pain and fury. Rod didn't hesitate. He moved in quickly, striking at the creature's weak points, its underbelly and joints, the places where its armor was thin. Zalara watched in awe as the human soldier fought. She had expected him to fail, but instead, he was slowly wearing down the beast. His movements were sharp, precise, almost surgical. It was as if he was studying the creature, learning its weaknesses with every strike. Finally, with a quick, well-placed blow, Rod severed the creature's spine. It collapsed to the ground with a deafening crash, its body twitching in its final moments. The crowd erupted into cheers. The Zorathians were stunned. They had never seen a human accomplish something like this. And as the creature's life faded away, Zalara found herself struggling to hide her disbelief. Rod stood over the fallen creature, breathing heavily but standing tall. His face was serious, yet calm. He had done what no one expected. Zalara's voice cut through the noise of the crowd. You truly are something different, human," she said, her words slow, almost reluctant. Rod turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers. "This isn't about being different. It's about survival. It's about proving that we as humans can stand against anything, even the Zorath." Zalara didn't answer. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on him. No longer. Filled with mockery, but something deeper, something like respect. The arena was silent as Rod stood, victorious over the Zorathian beast. The creature lay motionless on the floor, its heavy body sprawled across the smooth stone. Rod, chest heaving with exertion, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. The crowd, once filled with jeers and mockery, was now stunned into a hushed awe. They had witnessed the human soldier do what no outsider had ever done, defeat the mighty Zorathian creature. But as Rod turned to face Princess Xalera, he saw something he hadn't expected. The princess wasn't mocking him. She wasn't sneering or laughing at his defeat. Instead, she looked intrigued. Her eyes, once filled with arrogance, now held a hint of respect. Solara, standing at the edge of the arena, remained silent for a long moment. The tension between them was palpable. The air, thick with the murmurs of the crowd, seemed to hang heavy in the silence. She was a ruler, a princess of the Zorathian Empire, trained from birth to view humans as inferior. Yet everything she had thought she knew about their species was beginning to crumble before her eyes. This human soldier, this Captain Roderick Darnell, was unlike any she had ever imagined. "Impressive," Zalara said at last, her voice cool but lacking its usual sharp edge. "I admit, I was wrong to underestimate you." Rod stood still, not allowing any hint of pride to cross his face. He knew what he had accomplished wasn't for his own glory. It was to show Zalara and the Zorathians watching that humans were capable of much more than they thought. But there was something else, something deeper, that drove him in these trials. He wasn't just fighting to prove his strength, he was fighting to change their perception of his people. "I didn't do it for your respect, Princess," Rod replied, his tone calm but firm. "I did it because humanity has been fighting. For survival for as long as we've existed. We don't rely on power or magic or some natural advantage like your people. We rely on our will to keep moving forward." Zalara's gaze softened for just a moment. "Then why did you remove your armor?" she asked, her voice quieter now, a bit of curiosity creeping into her words. "Why show yourself vulnerable when you could have hidden behind it like every other human soldier I've seen?" Rod didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step toward the edge of the arena where the princess stood, the noise of the crowd fading into the background. He met her eyes, his expression. "Serious? Because the armor isn't who I am," he said, his voice steady. "It's just a tool. It's protection. But it's not me. I wanted you to see that, to see the person beneath it. That's the truth." Zalara's mind raced. The human before her was no simple soldier. He was more than his weapons or his armor. She had assumed that his strength lay solely in the technology of his people, their machines, their weapons. But now she saw that it wasn't the armor or the tools that made him strong. It was his mind. It was his heart. And in that moment, Zalara realized just how wrong she had been to judge him, to judge all humans based on her limited understanding. "Tell me, human," Zalara asked, her voice low. "What is it that drives your kind to keep fighting, even when the odds are against you?" Rod didn't hesitate. "Hope," he said simply. "We fight because we believe that tomorrow can always be better than today. No matter how bad things get, no matter how many we lose, we fight because we believe there's always a chance to make things right." Zalara stood there, absorbing his words. She had been raised to think that the Zorathian Empire was the pinnacle of civilization, that their power and strength, their centuries of dominance, made them the superior race. But this human soldier, this Captain Darnell, had shown her something entirely different, something she had never considered. "What about your people?" Zalara asked, her voice almost a whisper now. What do they think of you?" Rod's expression softened slightly, and for a brief moment he allowed his guard to drop. "They think I'm just a soldier, just another man in a uniform, but I'm more than that. I'm a leader, a protector. I fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. For the ones who don't have a voice. That's who I am." Zalara couldn't help but feel a strange pull in her chest. She had spent so much of her life surrounded by wealth and power, raised in a world where the strong ruled and the weak were left behind. But this human soldier, standing before her with nothing but his will and his courage, had just shown her what true strength really was. For the first time, she wondered what it would be like to lead, not from a position of power, but from a place of compassion. What would it be like to fight for something greater than oneself? But before she could speak, a sudden noise from the crowd broke the moment. The Zorathian soldiers and officials watching from the stands were beginning to murmur among themselves. The princess was supposed to be the ruler here, not some human soldier. There were whispers of doubt, and Zalara could feel the pressure mounting. She took a deep breath and turned away from Rod, her voice returning to its usual commanding tone. "You have earned some respect today, human," she said, her back still to him. "But do not mistake that for approval. You may have won this battle, but there are still many more tests to come, and you will face them all." Rod didn't flinch. He had expected nothing less. "I didn't come here to win your approval, princess. I came here to show you that humanity isn't what you think it is. And if that means facing your trials, then I'll face them. But I'll do it as myself, without the armor, without the walls." Zalara turned to look at him again, her eyes narrowing. "We'll see if that's enough to win this war." Rod nodded slowly. "It's enough for me." As the crowd slowly began to quiet down, Zalara's mind churned with thoughts. She had always believed that the Zorath were the greatest race in the galaxy, that their strength and power made them unbeatable. But now, for the first time, she was questioning everything she had ever known. The human soldier had made her see that strength wasn't just about size or power. It was about resilience. It was about the will to stand tall in the face of overwhelming odds, to keep fighting when everything seemed lost. And as she looked at Rod, standing tall and unbroken, she knew that the path ahead would not be easy for either of them. But one thing was certain: this was far from over. And in the days to come, she would learn that humans, for all their flaws, were not to be underestimated. The next day, the sun had barely risen when the next challenge was set before Captain Roderick Darnell. The Zorathians had gathered once again in their grand arena, and Zalara, standing high above them on a platform, observed the human soldier, with an unreadable expression. The first trial had tested his strength, the second his survival instincts, and now, the third challenge would be one of the mind, a test of intellect and problem-solving. Rod stood at the center of the arena, the weight of the past trials still hanging over him. The crowd had grown quieter with each victory. Though they had seen his physical prowess, they had yet to see the human soldier's true strength, the strength of his mind, and today, Zalara would make sure he proved that he was not only a fighter, but a thinker. "You've passed the first 2 trials, human," Zalara called down from her platform. Her voice echoed through the arena, drawing the attention of every Zorathian present. "But the next trial will be one of wit, not strength. This is the trial of the puzzle." Rod's eyes sharpened. He had no fear of puzzles. He had solved countless problems during his time as a soldier. Whether it was navigating difficult terrains, decoding enemy signals, or outsmarting rivals, his mind had always been his most powerful weapon. A massive stone door creaked open at the far end of the arena, revealing a stone table. Upon it was a complex puzzle, an ancient Zorathian device designed to test the intelligence of those who faced it. Its appearance was intimidating. A series of interlocking gears, levers, and wheels, all twisted into a labyrinthine structure. The puzzle was designed to challenge the solver's ability to think ahead, to read the mechanics, and to act with precision. Rod didn't move immediately. He took a long look at the puzzle, assessing its complexity. The Zorathians were known for their intellect, their ability to build such devices. But Rod had learned something important during his time as a soldier. Humans were just as capable of outsmarting the most intricate traps and mechanisms if they approached the problem with patience and precision. Solara, watching from her perch, spoke again. The puzzle is an ancient device. The solution has eluded many for centuries. No Zorathian has ever failed to solve it. But you, human, will find it difficult. Rod's expression remained calm. He had expected as much. Difficult? I've faced far worse, the crowd murmured, at his boldness. But Zalara remained silent, her gaze fixed on the human. She had hoped he would prove himself worthy, but now, with the puzzle in front of him, she wondered if he could truly match the ancient minds of the Zorath. Rod approached the table, his fingers brushing lightly over the gears. The puzzle wasn't like anything he had seen before, but that didn't matter. He was no stranger to problem solving. It wasn't just about brute strength. It was about recognizing patterns, understanding how things worked, and making calculated moves. His eyes scanned the mechanism, noting the way the gears interlocked, how each wheel turned when pushed. He knew that if he forced the pieces into place, it would only lead to disaster. The puzzle wasn't about force. It was about precision and thought. As he began to twist the first gear, the crowd fell silent. Rod worked steadily, turning one wheel, then another, his hands moving with careful intent. Zalara watched intently, trying to read his every move. She had expected him to struggle. Humans often did when faced with the complexities of Zorathian engineering. But as the puzzle slowly began to take shape, a sense of surprise crept into her mind. Rod wasn't just solving the puzzle, he was understanding it. He wasn't following a set path, he was finding his own way through it, with every twist and turn. The puzzle seemed to come alive, responding to his touch. It wasn't just about understanding the mechanics. It was about recognizing the flow of the solution, and Rod had done that effortlessly. "Is that all?" Rod muttered, almost to himself as he completed the final adjustment. With a soft click, the puzzle shifted, unlocking with a satisfying sound. The crowd gasped in disbelief. Solara's eyes widened. She had expected this to be a challenge that would test the human's limits, but instead, he had solved it with ease. Her mind raced. Had she misjudged him entirely? Was this human truly capable of mastering every challenge thrown at him? Rod stepped back from the puzzle table, his face still calm, but with a small, satisfied smile. "It's all about understanding the pattern," he said quietly, almost as if explaining to himself. "Once you see how it works, everything falls into place." Zalara stood up, her gaze never leaving him. For the first time, she felt something shift inside her. This human, who she had once thought of as little more than a warrior, was showing her a side of himself she hadn't anticipated. There was a depth to him, an intelligence, a quiet strength that went far beyond physical ability. "Congratulations, human," Zalara said, her voice much softer than before. She stepped forward, her eyes still fixed on Rod. "You have passed the trial." Rod nodded, acknowledging her words, but he didn't look for praise. He wasn't here for that. He wasn't here to win her approval, but to show her something different, something she might not have understood before. "This doesn't change anything, Princess," Rod said. "It's not about winning your favor. It's about showing you what humans are capable of. We don't just survive, we adapt, we learn, and we grow stronger." Zalara looked at him with newfound respect. She had thought that humans were only capable of fighting, only good for war and destruction. But this soldier, this Captain Darnell, had shown her a different side to humanity, one that was full of potential. He was a leader, a thinker, and someone who understood the power of resilience. "Perhaps there's more to you than I thought, human," Zalara said slowly. "Perhaps you and your kind have a place in this galaxy after all." Rod's eyes met hers, and for the first time, there was no barrier between them. He had done what he set out to do, not just defeat her trials, but show her the heart of humanity. And in that moment, he saw the change in her eyes, the shift from dismissiveness to respect. The crowd erupted into applause, but neither Zalara nor Rod acknowledged them. They both knew that the real victory wasn't in the trial they had just completed. It was in the understanding they had built, the bridge they had begun to form between their worlds. And though the journey was far from over, it had started with this moment, a moment where two enemies found common ground. The sun was setting over the Zorathian Empire, casting a golden hue across the vast palace grounds. The final trial was about to begin, and the air was thick with anticipation. The crowd, once skeptical of Captain Roderick Darnell, now looked on with respect. They had witnessed his strength, his intelligence, and his unwavering resolve. But there was one final test, one that would challenge him not only physically, but also politically. This trial would be one that would define the future of the human-Zorath relationship. Princess Zalara stood atop the grand balcony of the palace, her gaze focused on the arena below. The recent challenges had tested Rod in ways she hadn't expected. First, she had underestimated his strength. Then, his mind had proven sharper than she had given him credit for. Now, she was faced with a deeper question. Was she ready to trust him, or even consider him as an equal? She had spent most of her life believing that the Zorath were the supreme race, that their power and intelligence were unmatched. But this human soldier had begun to shatter those beliefs. His actions, his quiet strength had shown her that there was more to humanity than she had ever known. And now, she had to face the uncomfortable truth that perhaps humans and Zorath could coexist, not as enemies, but as allies. Rod entered the arena, his steps firm and measured. This final challenge wasn't one of combat or puzzles. It wasn't about his physical abilities or his intellect. This was a test of character. The Zorathian Council had decided that he would be tested on his ability to negotiate, to prove that humans could be trusted to uphold peace. He was to speak before the Council, to present humanity's case for peace and coexistence. The members of the Zorathian Council sat in their seats, their faces impassive. They were the ones who held the power, the ones who had shaped the destiny of the Zorath for centuries. They had seen countless diplomats, warriors, and leaders try to sway them in their favor, but none had succeeded. None had earned their respect. Zalara watched quietly from her perch. She knew the weight of the moment. She had been raised to believe that the Zorath were destined to rule the galaxy, that no species could challenge their authority. But now she wasn't so sure. Rod's words, his actions, had shown her that perhaps the future of the galaxy wasn't as clear-cut as she had once thought. Rod stepped forward and cleared his throat. His eyes scanned the council, meeting the gaze of each member before speaking. "Honorable Council," he began, his voice strong yet calm. "I stand before you not as a soldier, but as a representative of my people. We've fought wars, we've faced hardships, and we've made mistakes. But above all, we've learned to adapt. We've learned that survival isn't just about strength. It's about unity. It's about understanding that no species can thrive alone. We need each other. And for that reason, I am here today to ask for peace." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Zalara felt a twinge of doubt. Would Rod's words be enough to convince them? She had seen how the council could be stubborn, unyielding. But Rod's presence, his quiet confidence, seemed to speak louder than any words. One of the council members, an elder Zorath named Tarek, spoke up. "And why should we trust you, human?" His voice was cold, but there was a hint of curiosity in it. "Your kind has fought against us for years. You've proven yourselves to be relentless, but that does not make you trustworthy. What makes you think peace is possible now?" Rod paused for a moment, his gaze steady. "Because peace isn't about forgetting the past," he said. "It's about learning from it. It's about finding a way forward, together. We don't have to be enemies. We can be partners. We can build something better than what we've been fighting for." Zalara, standing quietly behind the council, felt a strange feeling wash over her. She had always thought of peace as something unattainable, something for the weak. But as she listened to Rod's words, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was a way for her people and the humans to find common ground. Another council member, a younger Zorath named Rylos, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You speak of unity, but what does that mean? Will humans simply surrender to us, accept our dominance? Or do you expect us to bow to your kind?" Rod shook his head, his voice unwavering. "No, this isn't about domination. This is about respect. It's about recognizing that we are all different. But that difference doesn't make us enemies. We all have something to offer, and together we can create something better than we could on our own." The council sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of Rod's words settling in the air. Zalara could feel the tension building. The Zorathians were not easily swayed. They had seen humans fight and lose, struggle and fall, but they had never seen a human stand before them with such conviction, such belief in his people. It was clear that Rod wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for all of humanity. Finally, Tarek spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Your words are bold, human, but actions speak louder than words. If you truly believe in peace, then you must show us, prove to us that your kind is capable of more than war." Rod nodded, understanding the weight of the challenge. "I will," he said, "but it's not just up to me. It's up to both of us. We must build a future together." Zalara stepped forward, her eyes meeting Rod's. She had watched him through each trial, each challenge, and now, for the first time, she felt a deep sense of respect for him. He had proven that humans were more than just fighters. They were thinkers, leaders, and visionaries. And perhaps, just perhaps, they could build a future together. "I agree," she said, her voice steady and strong. "We can't change the past, but we can shape the future. Let us work together, human, and see what we can achieve." The council members exchanged looks, their expressions slowly shifting. Tarek's stern face softened, and after a moment he nodded. "Very well," he said. "We will give your people a chance. But know this, peace will not be easy. It will take time. It will take effort. But if you are willing to prove your worth, we are willing to listen." Rod didn't smile, but there was a glint of determination in his eyes. "We're ready." As the council members began to murmur among themselves, Zalara turned to Rod, her expression serious, but with a flicker of something more. "You've done it, human. You've shown us that there is another way." Rod simply nodded. "This is just the beginning, Princess. We have a long way to go, but together I believe we can make it work." Zalara looked at him for a long moment, then turned to face the council again. There was a new resolve in her heart. She had once thought that her people were destined to rule, that their strength and power made them untouchable. But now she saw that the future didn't have to be about domination. It could be about collaboration, about unity. As the council began to formally discuss the terms of peace, Zalara felt a sense of hope growing within her. This was the beginning of something new, a future where the Zorath and the humans could coexist, side by side. And it was, all because of one human soldier who had dared to show her a different way. The days following the council's decision were filled with intense discussions and quiet reflection. Rod had done what no other human had ever done. He had earned the trust of the Zorathian Empire. Yet despite the momentous victory, Rod knew the journey was far from over. The path to true peace would be long and difficult, but it was a path he was now determined to walk alongside Princess Zalara. Zalara sat alone in her chamber late one evening, staring out over the Zorathian city. The lights of the sprawling metropolis below twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the vast empire she had been born into. But as she gazed at the stars, her thoughts were not on her empire's dominance. They were on the human soldier who had stood before her and shown her a new way, a way that neither the Zorathians nor humans had ever considered before. She thought back to the first day she had met Rod. How dismissive she had been, how certain she was that humanity was nothing, more than a weak, primitive race. Yet now those beliefs seemed so distant, so naive. Rod had proven her wrong at every turn. Not only had he matched the Zorath in strength, but he had also outsmarted their ancient puzzles and won the respect of the council. But it wasn't just his actions that had changed her mind. It was his words, his unwavering belief that peace was possible. Zalara stood up from her seat and walked over to the large window. The stars seemed to shimmer with possibilities. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of responsibility, not just to her people, but to the future of the galaxy. She had always believed that the Zorath had been meant to rule. But now, she wondered if there was a greater purpose for her people, a role to play in the universe that involved cooperation, not conquest. The sound of footsteps behind her brought her back to reality. She turned to find Rod standing in the doorway. His presence was familiar now, comforting even, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply shared a quiet understanding. "You've been on my mind, Princess," Rod said, his voice steady, but sincere. Zalara raised an eyebrow, her expression softening. "I've been thinking about you too, human," she replied, her tone teasing but warm. Rod smiled, but the weight of their situation was never far from his mind. "It's hard to believe it's really happening, that we're actually moving toward peace." Zalara walked over to him, her eyes never leaving his. "I never thought this day would come. I always thought the Zorath were meant to rule. But now, I see that the future is not about domination. It's about building something together, something we can both be proud of." Rod nodded. "It won't be easy. There will always be those who don't want peace. But I believe we can make it work. If we can change the way we think, if we can trust each other, then maybe we can show the rest of the galaxy that peace is possible." Zalara studied him for a long moment. "You're right, of course," she said quietly. "But I've learned something too, something I never expected. It's not enough to just have strength. You need more. You need heart. You need compassion. I thought I understood those things, but I've only just begun to realize their true meaning." Rod stepped closer, his expression serious. "You've always had heart, Princess. But sometimes it takes something, someone, to make you see it." Zalara's gaze softened, her eyes full of gratitude. "And sometimes it takes someone like you to show us the way." For a moment there was nothing but silence between them, but it was a silence filled with understanding. Both of them had changed over the course of the past few weeks. Zalara had learned to see the strength in humility, and Rod had come to understand that peace wasn't just about strength. It was about compromise, about listening, and about seeing others as equals. "I know it won't be easy," Zalara said, breaking the silence. "But I'm willing to try. For the Zorath, for the humans, for the future of our people." Rod smiled, his confidence never wavering. "That's all I can ask for." Over the next few weeks, Zalara and Rod worked together, side by side, to lay the foundation for peace between their two peoples. The Zorathian Council, though still skeptical, agreed to allow human delegates to join discussions on trade, defense, and diplomacy. While there were still factions within both empires who resisted the idea of peace, Rod and Zalara were undeterred. They had seen the possibility of a brighter future, and they were willing to fight for it. The first official meeting between the Zorathians and humans took place in the heart of the Zorathian capital. Rod stood at Zalara's side, his heart pounding as the representatives from both sides gathered in the grand hall. It was a symbolic moment, a moment that could change the course of history. Zalara looked at Rod, her expression resolute. "We've come this far, human. Let's show them that peace is not just a dream." Rod gave a small nod. "Let's make it real." As the meeting began, Rod and Zalara took their seats at the table, surrounded by officials from both empires. The conversation started slowly, with some distrust still hanging in the air. But as the minutes passed, the tension began to fade. Rod spoke first, laying out the human case for peace and cooperation. He spoke not as a soldier, but as a representative of his people, offering a hand in friendship. Zalara spoke next, her voice calm but strong. She spoke of the Zorathian legacy, of their history, but also of their future, a future that could be shared with humanity. Her words were powerful, full of hope and conviction. She was no longer just the princess of an empire. She was a leader of a new vision, one where cooperation between their peoples was not just a possibility, but a necessity. As the meeting continued, there was still skepticism among some members of the council, but there was also something else, hope. For the first time, both sides began to see that they could build something together, that they could create a future that was stronger and brighter than any war could have ever promised. By the end of the day, an agreement was reached. It wasn't a perfect peace. Not yet. There were still challenges to face, old wounds to heal, but it was a beginning. It was a promise. And it was a future that Rod and Zalara could now look forward to, side by side. As the meeting concluded and the delegates began to leave, Zalara turned to Rod, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We did it, human," she said softly. "We've taken the first step toward something new." Rod smiled, his voice full of warmth. "This is just the start, Princess. There's still a long way to go. But as long as we stand together, I know we can make it." Zalara nodded, and for the first time, she felt a deep sense of peace, a peace that had nothing to do with dominance or control, but everything to do with trust and unity. Together, she and Rod had built something that neither of their peoples had thought possible, and together they would continue to build a future where both humans and Zorathians could coexist, thrive, and lead the galaxy into a new era of peace.